I've said this a lot in the last couple of weeks, but we have some really interesting matchups, and they might be just due to circumstance, but at 155 pounds, this is one of those fights that we really get a good idea of who's really trending upwards in a really stacked lightweight division. We have Alexander Hernandez taking on Drew Dober. Interesting fight because Drew Dober is one of those guys that at 155 at one point, there was a chance that he'd have to move up to 170 for good. And realistically, right now, he's on a really good run. Out of his last 5 fights, only has 1 loss to a common opponent, Beneil Dariush, who Alexander Hernandez was able to emphatically finish very quickly in his UFC debut. Then Hernandez goes on to beat Olivier Aubin-Mercier. Then he fights Donald Cerrone, which was really weird.
He was a 2-1 favorite in that, though, which is odd.
And then he went on to fight Francisco Trinaldo in a fight that, personally, I know how you feel, but I thought Trinaldo won that fight. But that doesn't matter. Alexander Hernandez, so far in his young UFC career, is 3-1. He's got a number next to his name. He's taking on Drew Dober, who is a tough out. I get the Stan Smith references. I hear you out there on Reddit and the internet. But Drew Dober in his last fight, okay, let's go back to, fought Marco Polo Reyes. Beat him. And I thought, all right, well, that's predictable. Then he fights Nasrat Haqparast, who's one of the hottest prospects that not a lot of people are talking about. And I thought, oh, Haqparast is going to win. Oh, for sure. Drew Dober floored Nasrat Haqparast. And he's coming into this fight against a really good prospect. And I still consider Hernandez to be a prospect, even though he's fought Donald Cerrone, who's a guy that's still ranked 6th at lightweight, which is weird. But this is one of those fights that I'm very excited about. What's your take on it?
Drew Dober is so thick at 155, and that's really the only way I can describe it. And the reason I bring that up is because Drew Dober's fought at 170 before. Alexander Hernandez, after the Trinaldo fight, was openly talking about moving down to 145. So I'm curious as to how dedicated Hernandez really is to staying at this weight class in the first place. And the only reason I'm saying this is if he shows up to this fight as a featherweight weighing in at 155, I know that's a very different thing, and it might not happen because, again, it's not like he even had a fight booked at 145, but if he is a little bit smaller than what he normally is because he plans on moving down in the future, I think Drew Dober is going to beat the brakes off Alexander Hernandez. Only because Hernandez had one of the weirder MMA careers that we can honestly say anyone has. Came in on short notice, knocked out Beneil Dariush in under a minute. And Beneil Dariush, just skill-wise, is one of the more skilled martial artists in all of the UFC, really. He's phenomenal on the ground. He's a really good striker. He's good everywhere. So he's able to knock him out really quick, which is good, but it doesn't really show a lot about your skill set. And then he fights Olivier Aubin-Mercier, who's a good fighter, but beating him doesn't tell me that you can beat Cowboy in your next fight. It's a good win, but it doesn't show me that you deserve to be ranked. Then he gets knocked out by Cowboy, a fairly predictable fight. And then Trinaldo, who's an older guy. I know he's really tricky, but Trinaldo definitely should have won that fight. I know it was in Alexander Hernandez's home state, but still. I think it's going to be interesting. Hernandez should have the wrestling advantage, at least offensively. I think throughout the fight, he is going to make Drew Dober work really hard. So Alexander Hernandez's best path to victory is probably going to be a unanimous decision. Drew Dober, phenomenal chin. You can just see it. And he's going to stand, and you don't really want to stand and just trade bombs with Drew Dober. I think Hernandez is the more technically sound striker out of the two. But if you are going to sort of invite that wildfire fight, Drew Dober's going to hit you, and you're probably going to fall down. So I don't think Drew Dober's going to run over Alexander Hernandez. That might have been a slight exaggeration on my part. I think it's going to be a very fun fight. It's a very interesting fight, just because I don't really know who Alexander Hernandez is yet at this UFC.
If you want to see a really high-level striking contest, you're probably a fan of, Crow Cop and Overeem. You're probably a fan of Jeremy Stevens and Calvin Kattar for UFC 249. Alexander Hernandez, Drew Dober is one of those fights that's probably going to go similar to a lot of your big striking royale. I always say a striker's paradise. This is probably going to be one of those fights. If Alexander Hernandez is going to win, he really has to push the output. That's got to be the key to victory. I know Drew Dober, if you look at him statistically and the averages over his UFC career, he might be a little hair above Hernandez in terms of total output and also strikes absorbed. But if you look at the two in terms of forward pressure, Olivier Aubin-Mercier in that fight, it was a fight where Alexander Hernandez pushed the pace, down, in, clinch work, what have you. If Hernandez is going to win this fight, he's kind of got to do the same thing. I think he's going to be able to get it done. In terms of the odds, Dober, the favorite, minus 135 to Hernandez at plus 105 over in Tapology out of 204 votes. 64% predicting Drew Dober to win, and 65% are predicting to win by knockout or TKO. You agree with the fans?
I think there's only two ways that this fight ends. I don't think Hernandez is going to stop Dober by submission or by knockout. I think if he's going to win, it has to be by decision. The opposite, though, is the case for Drew Dober. I think if Dober's going to win, I don't know if he can outlast Alexander Hernandez for 15 minutes. That's the problem. He can have one really good round, but Hernandez has shown, at least in the OAM fight, he can push a crazy pace as long as he's not accepting a lot of damage during the fight. So Drew Dober's really going to have to make him pay for for every takedown attempt, put it on him on the feet. I don't know if he'll be able to keep that up for 15 minutes. I'm going to pick Alexander Hernandez, even though the whole video said that like I was going to end by picking Drew Dober. I think this could be a phenomenal fight, though. And it's one of those fights that either guy could realistically win.
And I mean, if you're a big Drew Dober fan, and Matt, you kind of brought it up without even saying it, and you want to find his key to victory, go back and watch his fight at 170 pounds against Frank Camacho. I mean, one of the crazier fights that I can remember in recent memory. And these are two guys, like I said, really just kind of getting going at 155 pounds. You string together this win and maybe a few more, and you're really into the mix against some of the upper echelon, the Dan Hookers, the Paul Felders, the Ally Quintus of the division.
Let's wait a little bit.
I mean, it's got to be said, but listen, we have a lot of odd fights, a lot of great fights coming up. 3 cards in 8 days. Keep it locked in with Fight Night picks. We've got predictions for all 3 of those cards and more on the channel, so make sure you check it out. Toss us a sub. Check out the playlist, and as we always say, Matt, Fight Night picks. Let's get into it.